The first thing I heard was the flatline. That long, piercing sound, steady, merciless, cut through the ICU like a blade through glass. Code blue, someone shouted. Nurses rushed in. A mother screamed her child's name, her voice breaking into the sterile air. And I froze. Because, on the screen, that heartbeat, my algorithm's heartbeat, was gone. I pushed through the crowd, eyes locked on the monitor, lines of code scrolled behind my eyelids. I'd written them, calibrated them, believed in them. The system was supposed to predict failure 30 seconds before it happened. That's why hospitals paid millions for it. That's why I dedicated 20 years of my life to perfecting it. But it hadn't warned us. It hadn't done anything. Dr. Vaughn. Step back. The attending snapped, hands pressing against the small chest. I watched as they shocked the boy once, twice. Nothing. The sound stayed flat. My name is Elira Vaughn, 42 years old. Biomedical systems engineer at our dentist biolabs. I built machines to protect life. And tonight, one of them had killed a child. I opened my tablet with trembling fingers, pulling up the system log. The data didn't add up, sampling intervals cut in half. Response thresholds shifted. I traced the code trail until it stopped on one line, revision 7C epsilon. Authorized by C. Price, Calder Price, the new CEO. He'd modified the algorithm. To optimize costs, he'd said in the last board meeting. I'd warned him compression could delay alerts. He smiled, then smooth, polished, confident. Elira. Numbers save lives, too. Now, a child was dead because of those numbers. The defibrillator's final shock echoed through the room. Then silence. Pure, surgical silence. I felt the world tilt, and for a heartbeat, I was back 6 years ago, watching another small body go still, my daughter's. The same tone, the same helplessness. I turned and walked out before anyone could speak. Under the cold hospital lights, the Ardentis Biolabs logo gleamed on the glass door. Blue. Perfect. Empty. Inside. They were still trying to revive him. Outside. I was already calculating something else. Not a patch. Not a fix. A reckoning. By morning, the headlines had already chosen their villain. Ardentis engineer error causes tragic death in clinical trial. System architect suspended pending review. My photo was everywhere, cropped from an old conference portrait where I was smiling beside a prototype that was supposed to save lives. Now that same image sat under the word failure. At 9:00 a.m., Calder Price took the podium at Ardentis headquarters. Cameras clicked like insects. He wore the same calm charm that had once made investors adore him. This was a systems oversight, he said, voice smooth as steel. We're deeply saddened by the incident, and we are taking swift action to ensure accountability. He never said my name, but he didn't need to. The pause, the look at the front row, it was enough. I watched the live stream from my office, blinds half closed, my badge still clipped to my collar. Every sentence from him was a knife dressed as sympathy. She was one of our earliest engineers. Dedicated, yes, but resistant to modernization. The room murmured. Resistant, outdated, disposable. When it ended, an email arrived: administrative suspension, effective immediately. No salutation, no explanation, just the signature block of human resources. I sat still for a while, the silence pressing against my chest harder than the noise outside. Then I took off my badge. It felt heavier than metal, like 20 years of purpose condensed into a single square of plastic. That evening, I drove past the hospital lights until the city fell behind me. The cemetery was quiet, washed silver under a thin layer of fog. I found her stone easily. I always did. Elira Vaughn, 2016 to 2020. Beloved daughter. Heartbeat eternal. I knelt, tracing her name with my thumb. My reflection trembled in the polished marble. From my coat pocket, I took the badge, the one that no longer opened any doors, and laid it beneath her name. I thought I was done fighting. I whispered, The air carried my words into the stillness. Maybe I just began. The wind shifted, brushing my hair across my face. Somewhere far behind me, the Ardentis Tower still glowed against the night. But I wasn't going back there. Not yet. Not like this. The office smelled of paper and dust, the kind of quiet that used to mean safety. I hadn't been back since my suspension, but Sabine Arlo insisted we meet there, after hours. She was already waiting when I arrived, her gray coat draped over the chair, a folder open on my desk. Sabine had been Ardentis's financial advisor for years, sharp, unshakable, the kind of woman who never wasted a word. Tonight, though, her eyes carried something else. Urgency. "Elira," she said softly, closing the folder. "Before you say anything, you need to see this." I sat. The glow from the single desk lamp painting shadows across the room. Sabine spread out a series of printed ledgers, foundation statements, and transfer logs, each stamped with different names, none of them mine. "These trusts," she explained, tapping the first page, "were established over the last 20 years, each under a separate research initiative you funded. You remember the Pediatric Diagnostics Fund, the Neural Imaging Pilot. All those little grants you reinvested into Ardentis subsidiaries?" I nodded slowly. "They were meant to protect the projects from budget cuts." She looked at me steadily. "They did more than that." Sabine connected the pages in a slow arc, each one leading to the next, until all of them pointed to a central line item, Elira Biomedical Trust. The trusts cross-own one another, layered voting rights, embedded through the holding network. Together, they control 75% of Ardentis Biolab's active voting shares. I blinked. "That's impossible." Her lips curved faintly. "You didn't just invest in ideas, Elira. You bought control piece by piece." The room went still. Outside, a distant siren faded into the night. My heart beat once, slow and certain. For years, I had tried to protect this company from the inside patch by patch, meeting by meeting, believing that reason could save it. But numbers, it seemed, could do what words never could. I looked down at the papers, the signatures, the invisible structure that had grown beneath us all this time. "Then," I said quietly, "let's remind them what control is for." Sabine didn't answer. She just nodded and turned off the light. The email arrived at 2:04 a.m. Subject line: termination notice. Effective immediately. No greeting, no explanation. Just 4 paragraphs of legal phrasing wrapped in corporate indifference. I read it twice. Then I closed my laptop and stared into the dark, listening to the quiet rhythm of my own heartbeat. It didn't race. It didn't break. It simply steadied. By sunrise, the city was still half asleep, lights flickering in glass towers like tired sentinels. I dressed as I always did, navy blazer, plain blouse, hair tied back, not armor, not defiance, just habit. When I reached Ardentis, the lobby guard hesitated before scanning my badge. The red light blinked. Access denied. I smiled faintly and signed the visitor log instead. Calder Price was waiting in his corner office, all sunlight and arrogance. The skyline framed him like a portrait of ambition. He gestured toward the chair opposite his desk. "Elira," he said, tone smooth as polished metal. "I know this is unpleasant, but after what happened, the board needs someone who can move the company forward. It's nothing personal." I picked up the termination folder, the Ardentis logo embossed in gold. The irony wasn't lost on me. My signature had once approved that design meant to symbolize unity and integrity. "It's nothing personal," he repeated, as if the phrase could soften betrayal. I met his gaze, steady and quiet. "Neither is what's coming." For a moment, the mask slipped. He blinked, uncertain whether I'd threatened him or thanked him. I didn't clarify. I signed the papers with a slow, deliberate stroke, then placed the pen neatly on his desk. As I stood to leave, His assistant appeared at the door, her expression carefully neutral. "Security will escort you out." "Unnecessary," I said, already walking past. In the elevator, the mirrored walls reflected a woman who looked calm, composed, perhaps even free. The badge was gone, the office behind me, but somewhere beneath the surface, an entire structure of hidden ownership had already begun to shift. Calder thought he'd ended my career. He'd just activated my control. The Ardentis building looked different from the outside, colder, taller, like a machine that had forgotten what it was built for. Sabine and I worked from my old laptop in her downtown office, where the only light came from a single desk lamp and the glow of spreadsheets. For 3 nights, we traced numbers through hidden ledgers and encrypted transfers. Calder's signature was everywhere, buried beneath layers of reallocation forms and corporate jargon. At first, it looked like a standard shift of budget priorities funds redirected from clinical operations to outreach initiatives. But the deeper we dug, the uglier it became. Patient care grants had been drained to fund marketing events, lavish investor galas, luxury partnerships, even a private sponsorship deal under Calder's name. And then there were the trade's quiet purchases of a rival company's stock right before their merger announcement. Sabine leaned back, rubbing her temples. "He's been bleeding the ethics programs dry," she said, reallocating safety budgets while pretending to expand research. I scrolled further. "This transfer," I murmured, highlighting a timestamp. 72 hours before the child's death. He redirected the alert monitoring funds to finance an investor campaign. The realization sat between us like a weight. Sabine exhaled slowly. "Do you want revenge, Elira?" Her question hung in the air. I looked at the column of numbers, each one a life reduced to profit, each decimal a pulse that might have been saved. "No," I said quietly. "I want accountability." She nodded once, understanding the difference. Revenge is emotional, accountability is structural, and structures were what I built best. We organized the data into a hidden ledger, dates, signatures, transfers all traceable back to Calder. Sabine would handle the legal chain. I would handle the vote. By dawn, the city outside began to glow pale and uncertain. I closed the final file, sealing months of deceit into a folder labeled Restoration. In the silence that followed, Sabine poured 2 cups of coffee. Her voice was calm, almost resigned. "Then it's time," she said. "When law fails," I replied, watching the light catch the rim of my cup. "The vote must speak." The office was silent except for the faint hum of the computer fans. Outside, dawn stretched across the skyline, washing the glass towers in muted gold. Sabine sat at her desk, sleeves rolled up, glasses low on her nose, fingers moving with the precision of a surgeon. We had been at this for hours, verifying, linking, and finalizing the activation of the trusts. Each transfer required authentication codes buried in archives I'd long forgotten existed. My initials, her countersignatures, digital seals from foundations I'd built in better years, all converging here, in this small room, to correct what had gone wrong. "Last key," Sabine said softly. Her hand hovered over the keyboard. "Once this executes, there's no reverting. The trusts become live entities. Their voting rights consolidate under your authorization." I nodded. "Do it." She pressed enter. The monitor blinked once, then again. A progress bar crawled across the screen. We both held our breath as the system processed each linked fund, every fractional share gathered from decades of quiet investment. Then the final confirmation appeared simple. Clean, undeniable voting power, 75%. For a moment, I couldn't speak. The numbers pulsed on the screen like a heartbeat steady. Absolute. Sabine turned toward me, her expression unreadable. "It's done," she said. I exhaled slowly, feeling neither victory nor relief. Just gravity. Power had never been my goal. I'd spent years trying to build systems that saved lives, not empires, but somewhere along the way, power had become the only language left to make integrity heard. I closed my laptop and stood by the window. The city moved quietly below, unaware that Ardentis Biolabs, the empire that had humiliated me, that had buried truth under profit, was now mine to command. Power doesn't heal, I said, quietly. Purpose does. Sabine met my gaze, her voice even. Then let's make sure this one heals. She began drafting the notice for an emergency board session. The cursor blinked like a signal flare steady. Waiting. The balance had shifted. The system was rewriting itself. And for the first time in years, the pulse of Ardentis was in my hands again. The ballroom glittered with money and pretense. Giant screens looped Ardentis's new slogan, AI for Humanity, while waiters moved through the crowd with glasses of champagne. Investors smiled, cameras flashed, and Calder Price stood center stage beneath a halo of light, every inch the visionary he imagined himself to be. And with this new diagnostic suite, he declared, voice smooth and rehearsed, we are redefining the boundary between innovation and compassion. The audience applauded on cue, from the back of the room. I watched him the way he gripped the microphone like a weapon. The practiced smile, the subtle lie in every polished word. I had built the foundation he was standing on. He'd turned it into a stage. Sabine stood beside me, calm as ever. You're certain about the timing, she murmured. Halfway through, I said, when he thinks he's untouchable, on stage. Calder gestured to a massive digital graph rising behind him. Growth is proof of impact, he said proudly, and our investors will always be at the heart of that mission. That was my cue. The room shifted as I stepped forward, heels striking the marble floor, sound cutting clean through the applause. The lights followed instinctively, finding me at the aisle's end. Calder faltered mid-sentence, his confident rhythm stuttering just enough for silence to bloom. This isn't a product launch, I said, voice low but clear. It's a shareholder intervention. Every camera turned, every head followed. Calder tried to smile, confusion flickering behind his charm. Elira, you're not authorized to. I climbed the short steps to the stage and set a single folder on the table between us. Inside, crisp and undeniable, were the official voting certificates each signed, verified, and linked to the controlling trusts. The front row leaned forward. Investors glanced at one another. The large screen behind us flickered, then displayed the update Sabine had triggered remotely. Voting power 75% Vaughn. E. The air thickened. Calder's face lost its color. I looked out over the crowd, my voice steady. The age of performance is over, I said. Reality begins now. And with that, the show ended. The boardroom was silent except for the faint hum of the ventilation system. Morning light filtered through the glass walls, slicing the polished table into sharp reflections. Calder sat at the head, jaw tight, eyes fixed on the folder in front of him. Sabine stood behind me, hands clasped loosely, a silent pillar of composure. Let's begin, I said. The screen behind me flickered to life. Line after line of data filled the wall. Transfer logs, signed authorizations, encrypted emails unsealed under audit order. Each slide told the same story. Falsified trial results, patient data erased, federal research funds funneled into private accounts. The numbers spoke louder than any accusation could. This is impossible, Calder said finally, forcing a laugh. You're fabricating. I clicked again. The next slide showed his authorization codes, timestamp transfers, and bank confirmations. His voice broke mid-word. These, I said evenly, are not fabrications. They're the company's own records. One of the board members, a man who had once worshipped Calder's efficiency, cleared his throat. The misappropriations from the patient care division alone exceed 40 million, he murmured. Another member leaned forward. And the falsified clinical outcomes, how many deaths were hidden? 3 confirmed, I said quietly. Possibly more. The room went still. Even Calder's usual smirk collapsed into silence. I let the evidence run its course, the buried safety complaints, the deleted whistleblower reports, the fake compliance signatures. Each revelation landed heavier than the last. No one interrupted. They didn't need to. The truth had its own momentum. When the final slide faded to black, Sabine stepped forward and placed the official motion on the table. Vote of no confidence in CEO Calder Price. One by one, the board members raised their hands. The vote was unanimous. Calder looked around, disbelieving, voice low and cracked. "You can't," I turned to him. The same calm I'd worn the day he fired me now reflected in my tone. "You're fired." Calder. The words landed clean, deliberate, precisely as he once delivered them to me. For a long moment, he just stared. Then the silence swallowed him whole. By the next morning, every major outlet had the story. CEO Calder Price ousted after internal scandal. Federal inquiry opens into Ardentis Biolabs. Engineer behind company's breakthrough. Holds majority control. The city pulsed with it. Screens in lobbies, whispers in elevators. Reporters camped outside the building gates. The same journalist who once called me the outdated engineer now wanted exclusive interviews, redemption arcs, televised apologies. I ignored them all. When one of them managed to slip past security, microphone in hand, I met her question with the same calm I'd learned to live inside. "I'm not the story," I said. "The patients are." Then I turned and walked back toward the elevator, the doors closing on the echo of cameras clicking. The real work waited below. The lab smelled the same sterile air, faint traces of ethanol, hums of servers half asleep. It had been months since I'd stood here. Rows of silent terminals blinked to life as I keyed in my old credentials, now active again. Milo Hahn looked up from his workstation, startled. He'd been one of the engineers Calder dismissed for redundancy. When he saw me, his face broke into something between disbelief and relief. "You're back," he whispered. "Not just me," I said, handing him a reinstatement letter. "All of you, within the hour." Familiar faces filled the lab again. Researchers, analysts, people who had refused to falsify data and paid the price for integrity. Sabine joined us briefly to coordinate legal protections before heading to another meeting upstairs. I walked between the workstations, listening to the quiet rhythm of keys tapping, monitors lighting, hope reassembling itself piece by piece. Outside, reporters shouted my name from the street below. Inside, the heartbeat of the lab steadied once more. Justice didn't need applause. It needed precision. And as the hum of machinery grew stronger around me, I knew this was where it began again, without banners, without noise. Justice doesn't shout. It works quietly. A year had passed since the vote. The world had moved on to newer scandals, faster headlines, louder victories. But here, in the quiet pulse of the lab, time flowed differently, measured not by profit or publicity, but by the steady rhythm of restored purpose. The rescue program was alive again. Rows of diagnostic terminals hummed softly, synchronized to the heartbeat of a single new algorithm, our cleanest, most transparent model yet. I stood before the central monitor, reviewing the final data sequence. Every variable, every code string had been rewritten by hands that once feared they'd never work again. Milo was among them, older now in confidence, younger in spirit. The door burst open behind me. "It's working." "Dr. Vaughn," he said, breathless. The simulation cleared all 12 parameters. No false alerts, no latency. The pattern held. I turned toward him, and for the first time in years, I felt something unclench inside me. "Show me." He guided me to the display. The waveform glowed bright green, unwavering, a clean, perfect pulse. The same line that had once flattened in silence now held steady. Alive. I exhaled slowly. almost afraid to disturb it. "We'll call it Eve," I said. "For the one who taught me why we build?" Milo smiled faintly, understanding without needing to ask. I walked to my desk, where 2 framed photos waited. Dr. Solomon Ahn, the mentor who taught me that science without conscience is just machinery. And my daughter Lena, whose absence had given that lesson weight. I placed them side by side. The morning sun filtered through the window, casting light across both faces until they seemed part of the same memory. Behind me, the machines continued their low, steady hum, no applause, no noise, just life continuing as it should. In the silence, I rested a hand against the console, feeling the rhythm through the glass. Some victories don't echo. They breathe.